Well, our last story came about as a direct result of our story we just did on Draculich Miller's Lost Muchin Gold Mine Incorporated. We had to pass through an old ranch site in Dismal Valley in order to get there. And this particular ranch site, there isn't a lot of information about it. It's pretty disjointed, but it was associated with all the cattlemen that were involved in the Superstition Mountains. Matt Caveness was the very first one to come in there in 1875. Mr. Frazer somehow picked up the old Revis Ranch, what was started by Revis in 1885, but he wasn't a cattleman. He had a fruit orchard there more than anything. But Frazer sold it to Clemens Cattle Company in 1909, and they patented it in 1919. Well, you know, the Bureau of Land Management wasn't even out here at that time. They didn't even do grazing permits until 1934, so all this stuff was occurring before the government was even actually involved in any of this area. And all these ranchers, these cattle, would be over in this Tortilla Ranch area grazing.
To me, Tortilla Ranch was really interesting because we went up that way, had to go past it to get to the George Miller Lost Dutchman mine. And I got to say, I went past that entrance to that area hundreds of times. And you know, I knew what Tortilla Flat was. I knew there was a ranch somewhere called Tortilla Ranch. I had no idea. It was new to me. And the guy goes, or my wilderness guide said, "Turn right here." I go, "That's just a little parking pole out right there." He goes, "Oh no, it's not." And we proceeded to pull off, and then there is a treacherous road, four-wheel road getting up out of there, going up the side of that mountain. And once you get back in there, it's not so bad, but it's tough. I mean, I've saw, you know, Toyota 4Runners and Toyota pickup trucks with four-wheel drive parked there, and they walked in or took a bicycle back in to go see because they didn't want to go down that road. But we had a really big Ford Trimmer to go back in there so we went back in and we drove that way. But I got to tell you, once we got over the ridge and opened up that gate and saw the Tortilla Ranch area, Dismal Valley, all that, it was kind of cool.
Well, you said something about at the windmill there was a date in the cement there. Do you remember that?
Well, the windmill that I saw wasn't at the well. There is a well on the property that we saw.
I think it said 1928, and I was trying to find out who was in control of Tortilla Ranch at that particular time. Hooley Bacon purchased this in 1946, and he and his son-in-law, Floyd Stone, ran the Tortilla Ranch from 1954 to the mid-70s. But that doesn't fit them in there to do that either. I would think either Frazer or Clemens is the ones that had to put that date in there.
Well, I think the thing that makes that such a pivotal spot because everything to do with the Superstition Mountains is kind of a small microcosm right there, because there was water there. There's water in that well to this day that goes all the way down. The river that goes past Tortilla Flats runs right through there. The trail into the canyon, Pete's Trail, is right there at the south end of the ranch. And there's the old stone house there that supposedly, you know, was the Lost Dutchman stone cabin, and where that whole pivotal scene happened with the George Miller mine, where the Indian met him there and go over the hill, that's where the mine is. And supposedly there was water at the mine several different ways through history. You might want to explain that. But I also noticed that there was, at the ranch, you know, there's a big river wash going through there. When I went through there, it was completely dry, and all the brush and lush stuff that would be when it was wet was lots of thorns. I mean, you would be deadly to walk around that place.
Oh, yeah.
But the foundations from the old barn that was there, the foundation from the house that was there, and we have some pictures of that stuff. It's pretty interesting. And I guess it was a private piece of property in that Superstition Wilderness for a long time until the Forest Service took control of it.
That's always been a question in my mind, how these guys went out there and acquired what they acquired. When Frazer sold it to Clemens, he patented it in 1919. How did he buy it from the guy from Frazer? There's no mention of what do you call it, homesteading or anything like that.
Yeah.
Caveness just went out there and built a house, and wherever his cattle went, that was his land range. But he didn't buy it.
Yeah, I know the Indians, that was a popular place for Indian tribes before that.
Absolutely. There's ruins out there, and it got its name from the military, Dismal Valley. And Tom had told a story about Dismal Valley when he went out there and found some old lead bullets and 58 caliber stuff. And there was, particularly from the mid-60s, 64 to 68, Captain Walker with his Pima Indians, the Apaches were attacking the Pimas at their villages, and he just organized a militia, and they went out there and had many battles in that Dismal Valley area, and that's why the military called it Dismal, because it was absolutely dismal for the Apaches. There was reports of from as many as, in one battle, 11 to 53 Indians who were killed in those battles.
Wow.
And Walker only lost one guy. So they were pretty good at what they were doing.
Well, that valley is kind of a crossroads, and it is secluded. And if they had water and something, they could, graze their animals and make a camp there safe. And you'd have to make a lot of noise getting there because it's surrounded by some pretty high peaks, except through that Pete's Trail.
Well, yeah, it's a major entrance into the Superstition Mountains from the east into the western part. And I run across a couple of interesting things. Floyd Stone worked at a ranch with his father-in-law, Hooley Bacon, and they had a guy working for him by the name of Pope, who was an Apache Indian from San Carlos, Elmer Pope. And it's stated in there that Pope spent a great deal of his time filling in those holes that Miller had dug because the cattle were getting in. Yeah, and I thought that was strange. Another one I run across that said that they piped water in from, I believe it was Cane Springs, which is southeast of Indian Springs, for 2 miles to get water in there. Wow. Evidently the water that was there wasn't sufficient for their operations, so they had to pipe water in. And that's not unusual. I've seen long runs of pipe out in Goldfield Mountains where they run water for a great distance.
Absolutely.
But
I also know that there is a windmill that's just looks like it's been run over by a truck out there. That's right by where the stone house is that supposedly was the lost Dutchman's cabin, and a big, huge metal tank out there. So that was working at one time, another place to get water. There is water there. I guess it just takes a little bit of work to get it.
Well, yeah, a windmill, you're going to have to let it run constantly to have enough water to dig a 150-foot shaft.
Yeah. But I do think it's neat that that whole area had gold mining, it had Indian battles, it had the Indian wars there, it had cattle ranching, it was kind of a dude ranch for a while.
Do you remember anything about the White Stallion?
I know there's a lot of wild horses, and they call the saltwater horses, but I think they're kind of descended from that White Stallion, aren't they?
Well, there was two things that they were talking about in some of these stories. The cowboys preferred to ride mares rather than stallions, but of course they had to have stallions at the ranch, and they just believed that it was one of the stallions that had escaped and was on his own. Another one is that the Apaches had their own private horses too, and they weren't opposed to riding stallions. And either one of those, from I think it was 1955 until the mid-70s, were reports of this White Stallion all over the Superstition Mountains. And in the late 70s, they finally found his carcass laying up under a Palo Verde tree, which kind of ended the mystery, but not where he came from.
Wow. A lot happened there.
Oh, yeah.
It's an interesting place, and I can't believe I didn't know about it until recently. I mean, I heard the name and our
Yeah.
stories, but I'd never been there. It was really interesting to go there.
Well, I've been through there on a couple of trips, but it wasn't something that was all that impressive, but I'm glad it impressed you.
Well, you know, take it for what it's worth. I am a fan of the Superstition Mountains, so anything new I learn, I find it interesting. So.
Well, there you pretty much have it. I'll tell you, just a little bit of everything happening there. The Indian Wars, the Lost Dutchmans going into the mountains from that point, cattle ranching, you name it, it's all happened there.
And a ghost stallion.
And then, of course, you have that White Stallion running around there, and all these things are just another mystery of the Superstition Mountains.
Thank you for watching this episode of Mysteries of the Superstition Mountains.